again, listeners. Always humbled to have you join me on my YouTube channel, So Not PC Podcast with Rob Adamus, or on my website, www.sonotpcpodcast.com. This week, felt I needed to talk about some details of the former NAFTA Agreement, now known as the USMCA, to provide some understanding of what changes, or not, were made, and why the U.S. came out as a clear winner in the agreement. Now, I'll preface this by stating, it's too bad Canada doesn't have a leader like President Trump and his negotiating team. Instead, Canada has by far the dumbest globalist puppet leader in the developed world, and his negotiating team isn't any brighter. I believe their collective IQs added together is less than 10, especially when Trudeau makes gender the prioritized subject in negotiating a new deal. What the hell? You couldn't possibly be a bigger degenerate than this guy. Anyway, I digress. Now, last week, the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreed to replace the NAFTA agreement with a new United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, now known as the USMCA. Sadly, instead of replacing NAFTA's managed trade with true free trade, the new USMCA expands government's control over trade. For example, under the USMCA's, quote, rules of origin, at least 75% of a car's parts must be from the US, Canada, or Mexico in order to avoid tariffs. This is protectionism designed to raise prices of cars using materials from outside North America. The USMCA also requires that 40 to 45% of an automobile's content be made by workers earning at least $16 per hour. Like all government-set wages, this requirement will increase prices and decrease employment. The USMCA also requires Mexico to pass legislation recognizing the right of collective bargaining. In other words, the so-called free trade agreement forces Mexico to import U.S.-style compulsory unionism. If the Mexican legislature does not comply, the U.S. and Canada will impose tariffs on Mexican goods. The USMCA also requires the three countries to abide by the International Labor Organization standards for workers' rights. So, for example, the bureaucrats at the ILO declared that right-to-work laws violate international labor standards because they weaken collective bargaining and give right-to-work states an unfair advantage over compulsory unionism. States and countries, the federal government may have to nullify all state right-to-work laws. The USMCA also obligates the three countries to work together to improve air quality. This sounds harmless, but could be used as a backdoor way to impose costly new regulations and taxes, such as a cap-and-trade scheme on America or the fraudulent carbon tax that Justin Trudeau and his globalist agenda handlers like George Soros and Al Gore want to implement around the world. Thank God a man like Trump understands fully the fraud the globalists are attempting through Satan worshippers like Trudeau, Macron from France, Merkel from Germany, Theresa May in the UK, and their like. Now, this agreement also forbids the use of currency devaluation as a means of attempting to gain a competitive advantage in international trade. Enforcement of this provision will be difficult, if not impossible, as no central bank will ever admit it is devaluing currency to obtain a competitive advantage in international trade. Of course, given that the very act of creating money lowers its value, the only way to stop central banks from devaluing currency is to put them out of business. Sadly, I don't think that the drafters of the USMCA seek to restore free market money. The currency provision will likely be used to justify coordination of monetary policy between the Federal Reserve and the Mexican and Canadian central banks. This will lead to region-wide inflation and a global currency war as the U.S. pressures Mexico and Canada to help the Fed counter other countries' alleged currency manipulation and challenges to the dollar's reserve currency status. Now, a true free trade deal would simply reduce or eliminate tariffs and other trade barriers. It would not dictate wages and labor standards or require intergovernmental cooperation on environmental standards and monetary policy. A true free trade deal also would not, as the USMCA does, list acceptable names for types of cheeses, for example. Those of us who support real free trade must not let supporters of the USMCA get away with claiming the USMCA has anything to do with free trade. We must also fight the forces of protectionism that are threatening to start a destructive trade war. Also, We must work to stop the government from trying to control our economic activities through regulations, taxes, and, most importantly, control of the currency through central banking and legal tender laws. So, as we go through this, some of the word is going to sound pretty redundant. So I'm going to give you some, let's say, specific details of what this boils down to without giving you everything that the new USMCA is all about, because there are a lot of pages, and if you want to go see it, the document is out there and you can kind of burrow down on it yourself. So, the New Deal is expected to be signed by the leaders of the three member countries, U.S. President Donald Trump, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto in November. The deal must also be approved by each country's legislature before it can become into force. While Peter Navarro, the director of the White House National Trade Council, said the New Deal means that NAFTA is dead, the USMCA still retains large remnants of the original deal. For instance, Canada scored wins with the preservation of NAFTA's state-to-state dispute resolution system and cultural provisions that carve out a certain amount of the Canadian media market for domestically produced programming. But there are also some notable changes in the USMCA from the 25-year-old NAFTA, including increased dairy market access, new auto rules, and a sunset clause. Here's a rundown of some of the key changes in the deal. Review clause. The USMCA includes a 16-year expiration date and a provision that requires a review of the deal every 6 years when it can be extended. It's less severe than the U.S.'s original demand for a sunset clause, which would have forced each side to recertify the deal every 5 years to keep it in effect. Dispute settlement. NAFTA's dispute settlement system, which allows member countries to bring grievances against other members over allegations of unfair trading practices, will remain the same, a key win for the Canadians. The investor state dispute settlement system, which allows investors to bring grievances against member country governments, will be phased out for the U.S. and Canada, while certain industries such as energy will be able to bring cases against Mexico. Dairy access. The U.S. will be able to export the equivalent of 3.6% of Canada's dairy market, up from the existing level of about 1%. This is slightly above the 3.25% market across Canada would have given the U.S. as part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Trump smartly pulled the U.S. out of last year. In addition, Canada will get rid of the Class 7 pricing system that was seen as disadvantaging U.S. farmers. Access for other agricultural goods. Canada will give the U.S. more access to its chicken, turkey, and egg markets, and British Columbia will allow the sale of U.S. wines at its province-owned liquor stores. Mexico agreed to allow imports of certain U.S. cheeses. Auto rules. Members must produce 75% of a car for it to pass through the country's duty-free, up from 62.5%. Additionally, 40% of each car must be produced by workers making $16 an hour or more to avoid duties. Tariff side deals. The U.S. came to side agreements with Mexico and Canada that would largely protect the two countries from tariffs on imported autos and auto parts. Canada would be allowed to ship 2.6 million cars to the U.S. without tariffs, well above the 1.8 million it sent last year, and sent $32.4 billion worth of parts without getting hit by tariffs. Mexico's deal was similar, except the country can send $108 billion worth of parts, so a significant amount more than what Canada got out of the deal. Commitment to not mess with currency levels. Now, while the U.S., Mexico, and Canada do not actively intervene to strengthen or weaken their currencies, the pact to achieve and maintain a market-determined exchange rate regime could be a model for future agreements with countries that are more active in currency markets. Increased protections for intellectual property. The deal increases the copyright period in Canada to 70 years after the creator's death, up from 50 years, bringing the country in line with the U.S. Additionally, exclusivity for biologic drugs before generics can be produced will be increased to 10 years in Canada from 8 years, a win for the pharma industry. Now, let me summarize this lengthy yet not even close to providing all the details of the new USMCA for Canadians. as much as we got a few things that were better than they were before, overall, we got a lot less than what we had before. In other words, 3 words that I'm going to sum this up with. Canadians got screwed. Not by the U.S. and President Trump, but Justin Trudeau and the pathetic Liberal Party. Any business person worth his or her salt would have done exactly what the U.S. did in negotiations. And it's called using the "you need us more than we need you" bargaining chip. And Canada and Mexico blinked and folded like pup tents in a hurricane. Canada's steel and aluminum workers were sold out. And there is a certainty the cost of prescription drugs will go up significantly and affect Canada's healthcare system, among other Liberal Party screw-ups in this. Look, you don't go into this type of negotiation by insulting the U.S. president and calling him names right off the hop. This shows how incredibly ignorant Chrystia Freeland is, and what a complete disrespect she and the team had and has for your largest trading partner, your closest ally, and a man, meaning Trump, whose IQ is higher than Trudeau's and his entire negotiating team combined. Trudeau couldn't negotiate his way out of one of his weird-ass socks, and neither could Chrystia Freeland and the rest of the We Don't Care About Canadians negotiating team. So, I say kudos to Trump and the U.S. for doing what any intelligent person or team should do for your country's citizens. Get as much as you might have thought, then more. Trump took a page out of his own book, The Art of the Deal. That was chapter 101. At least Mexico in this negotiation realized the need to be civil and came out smelling rosier than Canada. So, Canadians, the USMCA is another in a continual line of Liberal Party screw-ups that hurts Canada immediately and for the foreseeable future. Thousands of jobs will be lost, thousands of what could have been new jobs lost, just like the 8,000 lost jobs over the Kinder Morgan debacle, and the tens of thousands of jobs Energy East would have created, but the Libtard Party cancelled after promising to approve it. Congratulations, Trudeau. You did it again, you friggin' degenerate. Now, I'm normally a really calm person, but this piece of filth makes my blood boil. Okay? Now, all right, settling down. So, again, if you want to delve deeper into the details of the new USMCA, there are plenty of sites to go to, but please, I implore you, don't go to any left-wing Canadian mainstream media sites. I'm talking CBC, CTV, Maclean's Magazine, anything that's funded by the Liberals and George Soros, okay? They'll say Canada won, but that's not even close to the truth, okay? So anyway, till next episode, thank you everyone again so much for taking time out of your day with me. Always humble and forever grateful for this. Please share the website, www.sonotpcpodcast.com, and my YouTube channel, So Not PC Podcast with Rob Adamas. And continue listening to each new podcast with vlogs coming soon. Till then, be learned, be inquisitive, ask questions, grow your faith daily, take action against the tyranny of the Liberal Party government by getting together with awakened Canadians and inform the still unawakened. So, God bless you and your family in all things, and good night.